Welcome to our home, the Show Me Institute. I am Brenda Talent. I'm the Executive Director of the Show Me Institute. We are an effective and persistent voice for free market solutions to Missouri policy. And now more than ever, we need voices for freedom and liberty. Now I have the wonderful opportunity and the pleasure of introducing a man who needs no introduction, one of our co-founders and the president of the Show Me Institute, Rex Sinquefield. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you, Brenda. You know, when somebody says, here's a person who needs no introduction, that's actually a euphemism for the less said, the better. I met Art in 1971. I actually took a course, audited a course in international finance or international economics?
Taught both.
Both.
I taught both.
You taught both.
I don't know which, you were so impressive.
You were so confusing, I couldn't tell what the hell the course was. No, I mean, Art Laffer is one of a handful of people who have literally, truly changed the entire world. When he and Robert Mundell basically created Reaganomics and influenced not just Ronald Reagan, but Margaret Thatcher to change the fiscal policies of the world, the rest of the world had to come into line, and you saw tax rates around the world starting to come down, and that's a trend that has not abated, and I think it will continue. So this is a guy who has created and improved welfare for billions and billions of people, and it will go on for a century. And there's no way to be able to repay him for the wonderful things he's done. And I've probably said enough. I thank you all for coming, and I'm going to echo Brenda's words. If you want to support the Show Me, I just want to remind you, no amount is too large. So with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Arthur Laffer.
Oh. You are amazing. I want to just talk to you a little bit about Missouri. And I don't want to bore you with a lot about Missouri. You guys are considering the possibility of switching from an income tax, corporate and personal, to a state sales tax, a static revenue neutral situation. Because of that and because of my involvement with Rex and my absolute adoration for the work he's doing for free market pro-growth policies, I did a little study. I asked myself the question, if I were able to start a state de novo, okay, just a bunch of people and factories and stuff living there without any tax policy whatsoever, and I considered an income tax, what are the types of evidence you would like to see to allow you to make a good reasoned judgment as to whether in fact you should have an income tax in a state? Are you with me on this? I mean, that's the question. And what I did first was I compared Missouri with my home state of Tennessee, which the two states are almost exactly the same. They're both land-bound, Midwestern sort of states. They don't have any special features like gambling or like beaches or any of that stuff. And if you look at them, Tennessee has no income tax. Now, it does have a hall tax, and it does have a corporate income tax, but it doesn't have a personal income tax on earned income, okay? And yet, Missouri has both a corporate tax and a personal income tax on earned income as well. And if you look at those two states and being identical and everything, it's amazing the differences. Tennessee's growth rates are much larger than Missouri's over the last decade and even longer. If you look at all the metrics of sort of the health and welfare of a state, Tennessee really does. And Tennessee's revenues are not that far off from Missouri's. If Missouri were to be able to get Tennessee's tax policies and put them in, literally completely stick them in, at least the first question that would be answered to most people is, the doctor's phrase is, before you do something, make damn sure it won't hurt something. It's the old Latin phrase, if you remember, primum non nocere, which is first of all, do no harm. Here we have a state called Tennessee that is almost identical to Missouri. And it has a policy very similar to the proposal that Rex has been making for the state of Missouri. From looking at that, there doesn't seem to be anything that would really cause you to worry that there would be some really huge untoward event. That was the first thing I looked at to try to find all the evidence I could on that. The second thing you'd look at on an income tax is we have a lot of states in this United States of ours that have income taxes. We have a few states that don't have income taxes. There are 9 states without income taxes. They start with Nevada, Washington State, Alaska, you've got Wyoming, South Dakota, you've got New Hampshire, and you've got Texas, Tennessee, and Florida. So there are 9 states there. If you take the 9 states that have no income tax and you compare them with the 9 states with the highest income tax rates, and you look at their performances over the last decade, it is absolutely astounding. Those 9 states with no income taxes way outperform the 9 states that have the highest income tax rates. That includes population dynamics. Their populations are growing faster. Gross state product is growing faster. I mean, you name it, it's performing better in the 9 states without an income tax compared to those 9 states with the highest income tax rates. Now, you could argue with me, and maybe even correctly, that, you know, it's like comparing apples with oranges. That's not really a fair comparison. I mean, you look at Nevada. I mean, come on, give me a break. Nevada's got all that gambling and all that other stuff. No wonder they're doing well. You look at Florida, it's got all those beaches. We don't have those beaches. It's not a good comparison there. You look at Texas with the oil. You look at Wyoming with its severance taxes. You look at Alaska with all the oil. I mean, there it's really not a good comparison, comparing the 9 states with the highest income tax rates with those 9 states without any tax, okay? Now, while I don't fully agree, there is indication, there is reason to believe that there are systematic differences between those 9 states with no income tax and the 9 states with the highest income tax rates. You all follow me there? So what I tried to do then was to do a next thing, how would I answer that question of the lack of comparability of comparing Nevada with, let's say, California? And what I did was I went back, and over the last 50 years, there have been 11 states in the United States that actually had no income taxes, and then they decided to adopt an income tax. So what I can do now is I can go back and I can actually look at how those states performed prior to them putting in an income tax and compare it with what happened to them after they put in the income tax. You follow me on this? This is, at least I think Ohio's the same as it was then, now, and these other states. And of these 11 states, if you look at these 11 states, now they all did it at very different times. So what I did was I took the year of all the years and I compared them with the US average. So I looked at gross state product of, let's say, Michigan, compared to US gross state product, and I got their percentage. And then I look at what their gross state product is compared to the US today. I did that with all 11 states. If you look at all of the 11 states, each and every one of those states has declined as a share of the total US economy. Each and every one of them, and some of them have really declined. Pennsylvania, Ohio. The one I just adore is Michigan. Michigan went from 5.1% of total output of the United States before it put in its income tax. Today, Michigan is 2.7% of the nation's output. It has just been a devastation. If you look at each and every one of these states that put in an income tax, their share of US population has also declined. It is just some of those states, they started out poor. I mean, really poor. They couldn't get any poorer. Oh, yes, they could. They went down from where they started. I mean, it is amazing. When you look at all of the evidence, it is that the income tax is probably the single most debilitating tax for states. Now, you ask yourself, with this type of evidence, and I've not gone through it in great detail with you here, I could if you wanted me to, but with this type of evidence, why on earth would anyone ever want to put in an income tax? Well, the answer is pretty obvious. They want the money. I mean, that's what they did. So I immediately went back and looked at all of these. I looked at the 9 states with no income tax versus the 9 states with the highest tax rates. And I looked at all those states before and after they took in an income tax and looked at what happened to their tax receipts, total tax receipts in all of those states. It is absolutely astounding. But in those 9 states that do not have an income tax over the last decade, their total tax revenues have grown much, much faster than have the tax revenues of the states with the highest tax rates in the US. It's not only true this last decade, it's true the decade before. I could go through this ad nauseum with you. If you look at those states that put in an income tax, what happened to their tax receipts as a share of total US tax receipts? They went down. I mean, they literally went down across the nation. They didn't even get the money. You know, they now claim that they can't get rid of the income tax because what do? We need the money badly. Well, the truth of the matter is they've made themselves poor. And then claim it's their poverty that requires them not to get rid of the thing that caused the very poverty in their own state. It is a tragic situation. The last thing I just want to tell you about the income taxes is that if you look at all the major sources of revenues for states, all right, one of the things that's really important about tax receipts is that you don't want a lot of volatility. Especially you don't want volatility where revenues really collapse during bad times and go through the ceiling during good times. Because what happens is during the good times when those revenues go way up, what do these guys do who are in there? You know, they are not landholders. They are not stakeholders. These are not royalty. They don't own the state. They're renters. And they're bad renters at that. They deplete the resources as fast as they can. So with these people there, if they get a lot of money, they don't want to leave it for the next set of politicians. They spend it. And then when they get to the time when you have the recession, the downturn, what do? They don't want to lose their budgets. They then raise taxes. So it creates a very bad dynamic. If you look at all the major tax sources for the state and local governments, the most volatile segment is the personal income tax. It really is. Sales taxes, corporate tax, and all those others are far better. Property taxes are far better for stability and constancy of revenue. It's amazing, and I can tell you from my history in California, in the year 2001, this is true story, in 2001, all right, a full 25% of the general fund revenues for the state of California, 1/4 of all the general fund revenues for the state of California came from 2 taxes. They came from the tax on exercise stock options and realized capital gains. Those 2 taxes alone accounted for 25% of all the... Can any of you guess what happened to those revenues in 2002? They went to, I'm not talking about the progressive income tax and all the other stuff that also went down. These things were just like, Gray Davis one day is standing there in the state of California with a surplus of $5 billion, and he thinks he's king of the world. A year later, he's hit with a train of $15 billion deficit. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was my governor for a while, and I was on his Council of Economic Advice, had the same thing happen. Look at this. When you rely on very volatile taxes, you get caught into the situation of California. You get caught into the situation of New Jersey. And New Jersey had neither an income tax nor a sales tax. It had neither of those. It was one of the fastest growing states in the nation. It was attracting people from everywhere who were emigrating into New Jersey. And the state was running a budget surplus. A year ago, just before Christie took office, New Jersey had one of the highest income taxes, had one of the highest sales taxes in the nation. It was being governed by one of my former students, a C student, might I add. John Corzine, in case any of you remember. Remember him, John? You know, he was there. You guys remember him, all you Chicago people. County boards. New Jersey had the highest sales tax, the highest income taxes. It was repelling people like mad. It was one of the slowest going, worst performers in the nation, and was running huge budget deficits. This is the chance for you people to really make a serious difference and become the first real state to get rid of the personal income tax and put it in. And I guess you have a ballot proposition right now which would do that for the cities of St. Louis and for Kansas City. God bless you for what you're doing. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here with all of you. It's a delight. And Rex, thank you. I used to do this in class, and let me just do the example with you, which on the distribution of income and on changing the distribution of income. I used to tell my students that if I ran this class the way your government runs your country, what I would do is I'd flunk all the A students out and I'd give all the F students scholarships. You with me? Yeah. Now before you giggle, think about it for a second. Once I changed the rules, my A students happen to be a little bit smarter than my F students. So they never randomly make the mistake of guessing a correct answer. My A students still get all the scholarships, and my F students still are flunked out. By changing the rules, I have not changed the distribution of grades one iota. But what have I done? I've destroyed the entire quality of the educational process. I'm going to say this to you clearly. It's mathematically correct. It's academically correct. You cannot change the distribution of income with taxes. You can't. But what you can do is you can change the volume of income with taxes. That you can do. Thank you all for being here. And Rex, thank you very much.